we're gonna set up the speakers in here in a second.
Really, even temperatures. It's some.
Hi.
Hey, guys.
Hi. Dan, you're back. Oh. Me in general.
So. This will be done.
You guys like sort everything and celebrate.
Well, the good thing is, once with the office.
Oh.
Can you guys hear us?
Okay.
During the summers, they travel.
I put it into the
Well, he's in
minutes,
trouble.
but I didn't print out. the
It was.
minutes. And,
They've been to
we can,
most of the stadiums.
Yeah.
On the East Coast.
I'm sorry, we should have looked at that earlier.
Anybody?
no, that was a
I looked
good
at, the stadium in Washington DC.
I've only been.
Yes, I can hear you.
My brother
Right
used to live in
on.
Ohio. We went to a couple Cincinnati Reds games while I was up there.
Ted, what can I have ready to show? Do you want me to get the form when you sent, Micah?
yes, that's, I think that would be the first thing to do.
And y'all, I'm gonna pop out at 4 o'clock. I have another meeting I
Okay.
gotta take, but here while I can be.
Good, how are you?
I went with Tim Anderson. He drove me over to the section of 40 at the Pigeon today, and we just kind of got to talk through what they've been working on outside of the flash floods and just see
How does it
kind of
look out there?
I mean, there's lots of reactions. One is like, it's just still mind blowing that there's 4 miles of destruction on an interstate. So that the scale is still just baffling, but to see the progress that's being made is equally baffling. But it looks like there's still, they haven't started to like build the reinforcements of the road yet.
right,
They're
yeah.
basically like making like construction roads in the river basin so that they can start building. And
Yeah.
like, we're this far into it. And it's like, it just, it shows you the insanity of man, the type of things that we can engineer and do. Just that scale of engineering required to have an interstate through there. It's really,
It's really had an impact on the traffic. I tried to go up to Hot Springs the other day.
Yeah.
The traffic was backed up on, Wood Road and just for miles going into town.
that poor little town too. I think there, it should be opening back up in the next day or so. The one
When did
each
totally
way.
wiped out?
No,
No.
no, I don't know what the destruction was, but as far as from the Helene, it wasn't, and they got it back open, and then the flash flooding that hit the Tennessee side, I'm not sure, but I mean, that was 2
40.
weeks ago, and they
It's
should be
supposed to
opening
open next
soon.
week.
Yeah, so I don't know if it was, I don't think it was wiped out, but it's definitely flooded. But so Hot Springs should get some relief for 4th of July, which is what I talked to their mayor, and it's just like,
I finally just turned around. I couldn't get the time. It was back
Right. that
Because it was
really
a shortcut from Newport down into
Yeah,
Hot Springs.
wow.
Good, how's it going?
Okay, it is 3:03. And I'm calling the meeting to order, and as usual, if we can just go around the room, introduce, make sure that we can get my list. Ted Figura, Chair of the Aesthetics Committee.
Ken Dirks, committee member.
Mark Baker, staff assistant division construction engineer and CDOT.
Micah Rogers, local resident, landscape architect.
Dave Moyer, design build team, project executive.
Maggie Ullman, City Council.
Lynn Raker, committee member.
Ashley Hare, Transportation Department for the city.
Nathan Moneyham, division construction engineer.
Lucy Crown, Transportation Manager of the city.
Okay, and I see a number of people from NCDOT on online. Is Mike Zukowski here today? Don't see him. Okay, well, we do have a quorum. And Lucy, is it possible to take a screenshot of that list?
Of this
or
right here?
something? Yeah.
Sure.
uh-huh.
And David Hazard is on his way. He's just running a few minutes.
Oh, okay, okay,
He'll be here shortly.
okay, great, thank you. Okay, so the first order of business is the consent agenda, which is the approval of the today's agenda and the minutes to the June 18th meeting. And I know Ken had a addition to those minutes.
Yeah, the addition was just a clarification to make it clear that the estimates for each one of the form patterns represented the delta between what the NCDOT would pay or what the city would be responsible for. So I gave Ted some clarification language on that. It was one sentence. So I
Right.
move that we accept that.
Yep. And so any other changes to the minutes? Hearing none, ask for adoption of the consent agenda with the change to the minutes that Ken just made.
Move to approve.
Second,
Okay, and calling the roll, Lynn,
Yes.
Ken,
yes.
myself, yes, so the consent agenda is approved. Opening up public comment. And is there anybody online that's public? Okay, anyone wishing to make a statement before we head into the agenda?
I had one quick one.
Yeah.
Did the committee ever discuss whether or not you're planning to return the bridge 90 degrees on the abutment wall versus 45 versus 180? Has that been closed all the way?
Yes, I think I understand what you're saying. You're talking about whether they have a sloped abutment or a vertical abutment?
And then basically
No.
vertical abutment we've landed on,
Yeah,
but on
right.
the sides of the bridge itself, the
Return
walls
walls.
that return back into grade. I
Right,
didn't know if that had been a discussion that everyone had landed on or not.
right. I think we had a discussion and decided not to do that on the north side, not to try to do that on the north side. Yes, we did.
Okay.
And but yes, we do want that on the south side.
Gotcha.
I think currently, and Dave, you can tell me if I'm wrong, I think, what are we showing now? Looking at 90
We're
degrees.
showing 90 degrees on
On
both
both.
sides.
So if you want, yeah, that's where what we've currently got.
Oh,
that's-
I thought that there was going to be a substantial cost to do it for the city to do it on the north side.
No, doing 90 degrees for both is Mark's looking at me like I'm missing something, but
I think,
Can you clarify what we're talking about?
Yeah.
I'm confused.
can you,
the north side, you're talking about north side of Patton. What we're
Yeah.
discussing is
Yeah.
the abutment on the south side of Patton, changing the vertical abutment. And Micah's question is, how is that treated as far as what does it do when it gets to the limits of what the wall has to be there
Yeah.
for the bridge? It either turns back 90 degrees on both sides. You can continue straight and taper down or kind of flex something in between. What we have planned is 90 degrees. So we've got a box
Return wall tonight.
and each side would look like that with be
it
a
would
triangle.
be facing you.
Yeah.
Vertical.
I just wanted to make sure that, I don't think that I'd ever heard it clarified. Just figured
That's
it's good
what
to
we're doing.
clarify that, yeah.
And that will be our.
Talking about the wing walls.
Do you have those?
Yeah, I was trying to find the rendering. And Micah's got it incorporated into his really as accurately as we have, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there will be one on the north side and not on the
No.
south side?
There's one on the south.
It's just the south. I think the
Yeah.
confusion there is what you see there and what Mike put together is what we have.
Yeah, these
Okay.
only.
Correct.
Yeah.
The discussion there was the angle of that wall.
Right, the angle.
Uh-huh.
And it is 90 degrees.
I've got the one they did up if we want to share it, but Micah shows it virtually the same thing. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, first order of business is the form liner options. And hopefully we will get to a decision there. Micah, I thank you very, very much for, putting that, putting the 17,946 up, so that we can see what that would look like. And,
Can you make that
If-
larger so we can see?
or scroll.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it really helps with the sense of scale.
Sure, yeah, I hope it's halfway accurate.
Those help. And I want to say too, Ted, that, the other one that
Yeah.
had the angles,
yeah,
that was my mistake. I had plugged in the item number and pulled up some images on the internet, and
Yeah.
apparently it was just mislabeled,
Yeah.
but that one was actually called Kew Gardens, and it is a different item
Uh-huh.
number, but it is one of the Fitzgerald
Yeah.
line.
right,
So,
right. Yeah, so,
and it's short, it's not 42 inches tall, it's only 30 inches
Yeah.
from each module.
uh-huh. So, and have both of you looked at this, been able to look at this online?
I have,
Okay.
Yes.
and I think it's a very attractive design, and it shows up well in what Micah has put up there. It does to me speak a little to the Southwest, kind of almost an Aztec looking design, whereas I think it's nice. I do think it's very attractive. I had sent you an email with the design that's at the top of the monuments,
Right,
which I think could be replicated in some way, but it
Mhm.
would be a custom form liner, I'm afraid, to do
Yeah.
that. But that would tie in the consistency and that Nashville design element, the Ellington light.
This one.
No, to the drawing.
I'll just zoom out to. This is a wide picture, so I can either scroll like this or zoom out so you can see the whole thing.
Then do we have an image of that? Do you know?
Just what I emailed to Ted, I could forward that to Lucy, but she could pull it up, I'm sure, but.
and to me, it looked rather similar to, I mean, there are definitely
Yeah.
similarities
Does that show
to,
what you want to see?
to this one.
Thanks.
So I think the choice, and, you know, I was gonna say with respect to a custom form liner, well, who would design the form liner? But if we do decide that replicating the design on the top of the monuments, the Bourne Bridge monuments, is a good option to pursue. That's sort of, you know, unless anybody wants to go further in exploring other designs, that would answer that question.
What's your email, Lucy?
I think one of the things that your exhibit does for us is it really shows us how narrow an area this is. And the fact that it has to be pretty much a repeating pattern all the way across here.
Pretty much does, I think, just because it's so long.
Let me know if you want to spend some time at any one of these.
Right, I think these give us a very good idea of what things would look like.
Yeah, and I think if we're talking about a mural on the inside wall, if you're driving through this, your eye is going to be brought to that mural more so than what you see over the top of the road there.
Mhm.
This is from Lynn.
So that's, those are our monuments as of now.
Hmm.
So you see the top design element in that. Just has a similar.
So looking at
look,
that,
Similar. look.
I mean, it's not the same thing. How much of an issue would it be to design something like this right on the top?
I have no idea.
Okay, be full custom.
It's
Still
full
just 'cause-
custom.
just
I
'cause
tell
it's
you,
similar.
there's quite a bit of detail in that.
Yeah, okay.
So my understanding is they'd probably be single-use forms, so
Mhm.
it'll be pricey.
All right, okay.
Don't ask me a number, but you know,
All right.
I've never gone down this path.
Yeah, we're just looking at that top band with the Z, or at least I was. I don't.
Yeah.
know.
Just
With the
chevron,
just
zigzags.
the chevron.
Not all the
Yeah,
other
right,
stuff below it, you know, where it does get pretty detailed.
Yeah, that's all I'm talking about, is the chevron part.
Yeah.
I wish we could find a chevron pattern. I think that would fit Asheville really well if you could find one.
There was a custom, or not a custom, there was a form liner in one of those catalogs we were looking at, and it looks like the sunburst on the second.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. And can you scroll down on that, email? So that's the Kew Gardens one, the long strip, and then, I mean, it's vaguely similar. It kind of loses it in translation, but it's
Yeah.
also only 30 inches high. So it doesn't have quite the impact that the other one would have that we were looking at.
So you have a band of 6 inches on top and bottom,
Yeah.
be able to make it work, yeah.
I do kind of like that, the Ellington light detail, that it gives kind of a 3D illusion,
Mhm,
you know?
mhm. Do you think that if we sent that pattern to Fitzgerald, that they could relatively quickly come up with some pricing for us for the custom form?
I would like to believe so, but I've never gone down that
Yeah,
path. So I
Yeah.
really can't have to.
Do we, I mean, what I would propose, like, well, first of all, do we, all things being equal, do we favor this design over the 17496 design?
The Arizona Santan,
Right, yes,
it's hard to say, you know, I think this would be a strong reference
yeah,
to the Asheville
uh-huh,
detail. Whether or not it would be so, it's strong, but yet it's nuanced, so I'm not sure people would really pick up on it
Yeah.
unless they knew.
mhm,
But I like the idea of replicating that.
uh-huh. Ken?
I like the design. The only thing I'm concerned about is that it's only 30 inches tall.
Well, no, I mean, it would be, we do a
Oh,
custom,
okay, custom.
and it would
Right,
be
okay,
42 inches,
tall. All right,
1.5 inch reveals,
okay.
replicating that,
The bottom part.
the bottom
Right, okay.
design, right?
No, I think on balance, I prefer this too, but I subject
Okay.
to whatever, cost delta I'm looking at.
Right. Right.
I think Susan has a point online.
Yeah, Sue Loftus has her hand raised.
Oh,
Hello, hello, everybody. Sorry I didn't comment during the comment period, but I just wasn't aware that that form had been considered yet because I didn't see the notes. But I wanted to go back to the very beginning of the aesthetics committee again, as I have been recalling that originally when we were looking at symbolic representation of the architecture in Asheville, the chevron was totally chosen by the committee at that time as the preferred reference, and that would have even applied to, the medallions that we were going to do, et cetera. So I totally support getting the 42-inch version of the chevron that is on the screen right now. And I hope that just given the the increased impact and appropriateness for Asheville, that between the contractor and CDOT and the city, that we can come up with the custom liners, because in the overall scheme of things, a custom liner isn't that much more expensive than a non-custom liner, and it's well worth the investment, in my opinion.
Okay, thanks,
So
Susan.
thank you.
What I would propose then is that we pursue the custom liner with the with the idea that, like, it needs to fall, in the end, it needs to fall within the budget of what we have to spend. And if it does, for some reason, does not, or is otherwise not feasible, that we go with the Arizona Santan.
Yeah.
And let me say one more thing, is that Mark earlier today sent, and I sent this out to you too. I don't know if you've seen it, but the estimated costs. They were not doing we are not doing the one that's labeled, right, the doing the square column, so that knocks out $100,000 from this. We have, and I think we've been saying 400,000, but I think the more accurate figure is 406,000, if I remember. So we have some play in here. If there are no other costs that we incur, we would have some play for that form liner cost to increase somewhat, and still be able to afford it within the budget. So, Micah?
I'm just looking around online. There's a different company called Spec Form Liners Incorporated. They have a chevron that looks really, really similar. I can send this to whoever it's easiest to send it to.
Lucy, I think, yeah.
You send it to me, I'll show it.
Yeah, sure thing.
L Crown.
All right.
Nashville and see.
Check it just a second.
What I would maybe suggest would be is if that's the way the committee wants to go, and Dave can chime in if he sees any issues, would be if this with a 42-inch dimension, and we can also specify the reveal depth and all that, we can just send that out to all suppliers. And it may be that they come back with a custom. It may be that they say, well, look at this. So, and then we can just disseminate it to that. And in the meantime, sounds like was the other is kind of shelved as backup.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, Mike, I don't know when you came in and how much of this discussion you've heard with respect to the form liner option. What I just proposed is that we pursue the chevron design as a custom form liner with the Arizona Santan as backup in case the custom form liner breaks our budget, or there are other reasons why we can't use it. So I will put that motion on the table. Looking for a second. Okay. So I'll call the roll on that. Lynn?
Yes.
Okay, Ken?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Okay, myself is a yes. Okay, so that is what we'll pursue. And pending what Lucy is going to pull up.
There it is.
Did you get Micah's email yet?
Just
Okay.
now.
Just came through.
All right.
They put a watermark on that picture that makes it look wavy, but it's actually not.
Yeah, what's the height
Yeah,
of that?
It's 3 feet. So
Okay.
so you'd have a 6-inch band on top of the
Probably
bottom.
Yeah.
close enough with a nice
Yeah.
band.
Yeah,
That's all
I
right.
think you could still go down custom route, but that looks like,
That one's pretty close. It's just not quite as tight of a V, but
yeah.
it's still kind of close. I think I would rather that as the backup. than-
yeah.
So that's,
Okay. Do you want to make that motion?
Okay, I will make the motion that we consider this one that we're looking at now, Garden Chevron 2, as the backup. Is the custom made form liner for the Ellington line detail is not cost effective.
Okay, and pending this being cost effective, can we have
Oh,
that?
right, right.
Can you scroll back down? Just want to see what the reveal says on that.
I think it was
It's an inch and a half.
Okay, so you're,
Within.
On the sides. It's-
Yeah, it's as close as you're gonna get.
Yeah, and I think it looked nice with the band on top and bottom.
Yeah. Okay, I'll second that motion. And, any further discussion? Okay, Mike,
Yes.
okay, Ken,
yes.
myself, yes, and Lynn, yes,
Yes.
okay. Okay. Okay, let us now move on to the, underbridge lighting. Was NCDOT able to integrate the Micah's lighting plan with the one that you guys came up with?
So this is Greg Hall. I have integrated the plan where he shows the MUP kind of curved around under the bridge, and then the 4 Monticello lights against that, as well as the wall packs that we have been kind of batting around back and forth about which design, which style to go with. If you give me just a second here, I'll get that pulled up where everybody can see where we're at. I'm still trying to go through the calculations with all the different fixture types that we've looked at through here. Just takes a little bit of time. I'm not an artistic rendering type guy, so it doesn't come naturally to me. But I'm running a calculation right now with the program. I'm getting ready to render this and throw it up on the screen so everybody can take a look.
Okay.
All right, so can everybody see that? So this is a software program that we use called AGI 32. What I did was put in the MSC back walls on both sides, and then just kind of made up the center vents. We had originally talked about putting 3 lights on the vent. 3 lights just isn't going to work. 4 lights is what it's going to take to get everything to go, unless we go with the tunnel fixtures. The tunnel fixtures we can do with 3 lights, but anything else is going to take 4.
Yeah.
So, for example, so this is Patton Avenue that we're looking at right here. With these 4 lights on Patton, this is the higher output conventional wall pack that we talked about, the one that looks like a normal wall pack. We're at 2.2 foot candle on Patton, so I'm meeting my numbers on Patton. The MUP, and Ted, in the emails back and forth with Duke this week, I made the comment that these Monticellos just don't put out a heck of a lot of light. Even with the wall packs here on the center bent and along this end bent here, with the Monticellos, we're only at 1.19 on the MUP with just these four. Now I could potentially add, or we could potentially reduce the spacing and put, maybe 6 under the bridge. That's one option. The other option, so these circles right here were the ones that Micah had put in for perhaps some lights hanging from the deck. I have not had an opportunity to put those in calculations yet. But that is another option that we could consider, is some lights hanging above the MUP. But I don't want to get out in front of Mark and Nathan and what maybe they thought about on their end. So Mark, if you want to clarify anything or correct anything I've stated there, feel free.
No, you're good. That's good information. I mean, I think where we were trying to head, and I've communicated back and forth with Greg some, is just trying to get to that base level lighting the DOT would install, basically everything that's mounted on the bridge.
And one thing we could do is put the regular wall packs or even those contemporary looking wall packs along Patton. I think we can make that work with 4 fixtures. And then on the back side here where the MUP is, we could do the tunnel fixtures to get that extra light out that we need to get to the MUP.
Question on the right side as we're looking at this, that's the, doesn't that side not have a retaining wall? Isn't that just open?
Yeah, it's open.
This is open right here.
Yeah.
So it would be some type of pier and cap system like I've shown in the middle.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a pretty easy change to make, and I don't think it's going to really affect the calculations.
The other question, we don't want it to be so bright that when you are, say, riding your bike along and your eyes are used to the evening light, and then you go onto the bridge, all of a sudden it's really bright, and then you come out and your eyes are now accustomed to something really bright, and you're going back to a more dimly lit MUP.
That's
so
right.
I think that's a concern. Also, to me, it would be better to have more lights that are less bright than a few really bright ones, especially along the MUP, so we have a more even lighting coverage.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that either. I was just throwing an option out that we could put those tunnel fixtures up that would put out more light, or the other option, like you mentioned, Mike, is to put maybe a couple more fixtures back here. The problem is, well, there's 2 problems. Number one, we don't know where the MUP is going to be, is one. And then number 2 is if it is any further away than is shown in what Mike could put together, the light from the wall packs really doesn't provide a lot. I'll flip over to another, I'll try to, if these emails get out of the way, flip over to another view here that
is it possible
to see what the light is.
Is it possible to put 4 ceiling packs centered on the MUP area, just so the whole area has a more even lighting to it?
It's certainly possible, yes.
I think that would give us less hot and cold spots. It would give them more even lighting and make people feel a bit more comfortable, because you wouldn't be seeing people in silhouettes as much.
Mm-hmm.
I think from the DOT perspective, and Greg, you correct me if I go off the rails, and Mark too, because they've done a little more work on this. I think from a committee perspective and the decision that we need right now, what we're looking at and what we're willing to commit to from DOT would be 3 rows of 4 packs, 1 on the MSC wall, 1 on the bent facing back, and we would commit to pay for 1 in the middle. We would work on through Greg's process, distributing that light best we can, and that would set you a baseline. And then on top of that, we'll run conduit so that whether it be the Monticello style lights from Duke or something more elaborate down the line, that the ability to supplement that is there in whatever capacity. And all of that would be, as far as those lights, that would be the baseline that we would do, which is all it really has to be decided right now. And then from there, you have the most kind of direction, even to the point that at some point we could take these back down if you decide that it's excessive or contrasts with something else.
I think that would be the big thing, is if you ended up doing some type of ceiling art installation or something in there
Sure.
that dropped the deck down, that would be the problem. But to your point, if you do the conduit on the ground and you just pull those Monticellos, even if you double the number of them, then you
Sure.
can kind of offset that problem. To me, that makes the most sense to have the three packs or the 3 sets of packs.
And that to the spreadsheet that Mark sent out, that's the cost that's represented there is it's actually 4 rows. Because we're talking about one for the sidewalk on the other side of the road too.
Correct.
But that would be the baseline DOT cost. That's what we would commit to with the committee. Conduit as well. And then from there, in the future conversations, you can supplement as desired.
Would the center lighting, would that be able to be converted in the future to a colored LED lighting system? Or does that require a separate?
I think that would just be a different system. The color lighting that you've seen examples of are actually in between the bays shooting out, so it really wouldn't even be in the same spot. But to the point, if those lights, if that is ultimately what the city pursues by encroachment or whatever, and those conduits there, and you use that, or even to a later drop down something, then we just take those center wall pegs off.
And I estimated that using the more expensive option, which is the higher output tunnel type, maybe too bright, on the whole scenario, especially adding 3 rows. But I think
Which
just to
goes,
get a number on, we know, I guess what I estimated to get 74,000 is, I'm pretty confident that'll get plenty of light under there. I don't even think it'll need that much. So that's what we're committing. And I think what Greg needs more than anything is kind of, now he knows he want it more evenly distributed, but I think is generally part of the thought process, trying to do a design. But really it's all about what kind of foot candle levels do you want? And then that dictates, that would be a piece, which doesn't have to be decided now, through the design process. And then of the 3 fixture types, since that's using the tunnel, if the committee has a preference on those fixture types from a visual standpoint, not a light output, I think you would need to know that to kind of finalize the design. Yeah, if you said with a high output, just the way they look and they're gonna put out a lot of light, we don't want to use those. We want to use more like, to Mike's point, more of the traditional type. That's the kind of parameters we would need to know, but not right now. Really, all we need to know right now is we're committing that much money to put in the light system for the MUP and the sidewalk. And we feel like we've estimated it on the high end of likelihood of what would be needed. But if the committee is just okay with that, knowing that the final design can be worked out over the coming months with some coordination with Greg and myself, we can move forward from here.
Yeah, I'm still a little bit unclear as to if the city, and I think right now the leaning of the Senate committee is strongly to have an installation in the future of some kind of colored LED light display, whether that requires anything additional at this time to what's being proposed by NCDOT. Could that system hook on to what's being delivered here? Would it require lighting infrastructure, the conduit to be put in at this time? Or is this conduit that the city would install with an encroachment agreement?
so we would install, and this is the second piece of this.
Yeah.
We're agreeing to and saying that the DOT is going to pay for a base level lighting, and we're going to put conduit runs through the corridor so that the conduit infrastructure is there. What would need to be done later would be a junction box at the base of the wall and attachment up the backside of the column or whatever it would be from there. Now, and the lights that we install as the base level can stay there.
Mhm.
If they conflict, we can take them back down.
Right. Mhm.
And our
Depending on what you're,
Our conduit feeding these lights that are bridge mounted is external. So the conduit runs up either the MSC wall or runs up the column to the cap. All of that, I think, to like a previous meeting conversation, that's gonna be there. If it's conflicting with what you need to do, it can be easily removed. If it needs to be added to, it can be added to.
the other note to make, the base level lighting we're talking about,
Mhm.
we would pay the utility bill.
Yeah.
So that would be ours. So anything supplemental you do would be coming off with a separate junction box with conduits up there, and you'd be whatever agreement the city would have would do. And that goes for the more like pedestal style lighting or something with your own structure.
Yeah.
That it would be, but the conduit that you need infrastructure wise and the ground would be there.
Okay, okay. So in terms of costs to the city, there would be no cost to the city at this time.
Correct.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking that, what's being proposed is what we should go along with, and adding in, because I think Mike's comment was, from my perspective at least, right on, that we want the light to be distributed pretty much as softly as possible, as softly and evenly as possible. And then, do Ken and Lynn, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I would like to. I'm not sure I totally follow what's going on or what's proposed, but my biggest concern is we don't have a plan yet for what else is gonna go on in there. And these pole lights, these traditional pole lights, more than likely are not gonna really blend well with anything more contemporary that we might be doing there. But that might be a long time away.
Yeah.
And so if I'm understanding it, that if once that is the city's responsibility.
Yeah,
So once we put them in, it's unlikely that we're gonna remove them
right,
because that would not have a good PR.
right, right,
thing.
right.
So
And-
I think that's my concern right
Yeah,
now
yeah.
is committing to those pole lights. I'd
Yeah.
almost rather see a more contemporary bollard or something
I
like
think
that.
the benefit to the lighting design, and this is something as it's done, we'll send it back to city staff and ultimately can be reviewed, but it would, with the baseline lighting plan that we're talking about, you would still get that whole area lit without the pedestal, so you could wait and see.
You could wait, but the conduit's in there and
And for future use or whatever, and you're not,
junction boxes.
so you don't have to commit to the Monticello style, whatever now.
Yeah, that would be my
You
preference.
get, your baseline lighting would be DOT paid for, DOT maintained on structure.
The other thing is that in terms of timing, hopefully, and we'll hear from David in a minute, but hopefully the city will have already basically designed a public art installation by the time the project is complete. The Duke lighting doesn't go in until the project is complete. And so, there is the opportunity for, with I presume with the advice and consent of the Greenways Committee, to change the style of that lighting, going under the bridge and, to have it blend in more with the artwork. And that's a decision that the city can make.
Yeah.
Going forward.
If we have that flexibility, I think that's good.
I think that's the goal with what we're trying to propose, is give you as much of the blank canvas as you can while still giving you a baseline level of the immediate need is met, no matter what.
Ken?
I agree.
Okay, okay. So, and then, we need to address the type of tunnel lighting or contemporary, or, I think the other one.
Ken, I think Susan had her hand raised.
Oh, Susan?
I did, but you answered it. Thank
Okay.
you. Okay, and I do totally agree with potentially bollards and a different fixture than Monticello, depending on how the bridge design ends up. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'll really depend on what the city decides the style and period of the
the artwork and yeah. Okay, thanks.
Greg, do you have the three styles, the image of the three styles handy, or I can take over and share either one?
Yeah, I was trying to find them here and pull them up.
I've got it if you want me to take it.
Yeah, if you got it, I'll just, that'd be faster. And these are just three that I picked. So like, we're not married to these fixtures at all.
And I think you had a note somewhere that don't pay attention to color as much because there are, I guess, different colors available of each type. But you got the contemporary type that's more of a downcast, which may, correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, would cause a little more issue with trying to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish or not.
It very well will, yeah.
Yeah. And then the traditional type and then the high output is just, that's the tunnel type that puts out a lot more light.
So that traditional type is what I had in that render I was just showing.
Okay.
Because it's been mentioned before that the high output tunnel type might actually blind bikers coming through, right? And we obviously don't want that.
Yeah. And the traditional type, I think, is more in line with what's been recommended for State Street. Similar to what is currently under the McDowell, the McDowell tunnel. That would be my vote. Others?
Well, Greg, it seems like last time you presented this, the contemporary type was less, and then traditional was more, and then the high output was most as far as foot candles. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, so would we need more of the contemporary type if we did that one? Or would we just have less foot candles?
So we got a foot candle number that we need to hit. So it would take whatever number of fixtures are needed to hit that number.
Okay. So, and that's on DOT's budget, more or less?
More or less. I think generally what I have as far as just conversations with our leadership is to get to that baseline point. Okay. If we,
and I think we can make it work within
I think that's
the fixtures within the budget that I created.
To the point, the budget that we've looked at and pitched, we've tried to be on the high end if you went. So I think we're flexible that, and to Greg's point, you're talking about more of the contemporary type fixtures versus less traditional, just so the number of lights it would take to get there. I think the other thing, and Greg, you correct me if I'm wrong, but there's an outcast kind of piece to that. Those contemporary ones are more downcast than out.
Yeah.
Well, we do have, and I would much prefer a down one in general, but we do have the overhead of the bridge too, to keep that light from going out.
Yeah.
So
from like a pollution standpoint.
Yeah.
One thing to note with the cutoffs, if you do in the future do some kind of LED lights or colored lighting and want to continue with these in addition to the decorative lighting, you probably want something with some kind of cutoff because you don't want to blast out that future light on the upper deck. Obviously, as Nathan said, you can always, I guess, modify or remove or change these at that point in time. But if you wanted to leave the door open to use these in addition to whatever decorative lighting, you probably would want something that there's a partial cutoff or a full cutoff to cast that light down.
Which one would that favor?
I would say either the first two.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I like the contemporary one best, you know, as far as appearance and cleanness, and typically like the more downcast, but, for that reason too, I think that's another reason.
But you would
And
wash
thought
that
of-
colored light out
Yeah.
with probably that last tunnel light.
It's almost like the traditional is like a floodlight almost to me, maybe, you know, it's got a wider,
More so the contemporary, I think,
Distribution.
for sure, but Greg is the expert.
And I think you'll have less glare with the contemporary. And if we need more fixtures with the contemporary and it doesn't cost us any additional, I think having more fixtures just provides us hot and cold spots, and with less glare and not lighting the underneath side of the bridge, all of them really are points in favor of the contemporary. And as Lynn said, that it also is a better looking fixture.
Ken?
Well, I mean, there are pros and cons of the contemporary. The high output to me is just not appropriate. It's a very industrial. It's much too intense, I think. The question is between the contemporary and the traditional. Unless you're going to mix them, you know, and put the contemporary on the wall, casting, you know, shining down on the whatever mural is going to be there, and then traditional on the other side where the bridge supports are. Then you really got to go with one or the other. And I guess between the two of them, I'd probably go with the traditional.
Is there a version of the traditional type that's not, that would be mounted and shoot down instead of the way this one's angled outwards?
No, they all kind of look similar to that. Some of them have a piece of glass that sticks out like a triangle of glass. That helps to aim down a little bit, but they're all different manufacturers, all have the same basic shape, and they're meant to be mounted like they're shown in this drawing here.
So for the row down the middle, how would it?
Didn't mean to start right.
Oh, no. You need one.
You hear Greg?
No, what was that?
For the row in the middle, the question was how it is mounted, but I think the answer is it would be a different fixture. With a similar light out. Correct.
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge to get it all the way to the middle.
Mine is the row of lights actually in the middle. Downcast would not be one of these fixtures.
Oh, no, sorry. No, it wouldn't be one of these. It would be what's called a pendant mount fixture. These are wall mount fixtures. And I'll find one of those. So if you're it'd be similar to a fixture in a parking garage, if you're familiar with anything like that, where they hang down in parking garages.
I think the question really, Greg, you tell me if I'm wrong, is we're asking if the traditional, which would equate itself to a certain number of fixtures to get the required foot candles, or the contemporary, which we know will generate more fixtures. And then for the middle lights, the pedestal, the more downcast in the middle run, we would just mirror that other type of fixture with a light with a similar output as what selection is made here, right?
Yes, that's right.
But it would be a different straight down
It wouldn't be,
attachment.
yeah.
No.
Would it work from an aesthetics standpoint to have, to mix the two, to have the traditional on the piers and the contemporary on the abutments?
That's what I was thinking, because contemporary shoots down and will light that mural nicely.
It's a little brighter.
But it wouldn't work because we got, a fairly wide area that we're dealing with in terms of lighting. It's got different components to it as you go across the area. I don't think you could use it exclusively. I think you'd have to match it with a traditional on the other side for the bridge views. And I don't know if that's possible or not.
I mean, from a design perspective, certainly you could have either or both. And we can run the numbers and see how they look. And again, I just want to emphasize again, this is one manufacturer I looked at. There are several manufacturers that may be able to give us better light output from a contemporary type fixture instead of this Hall of Fame fixture that's shown here. There's Cooper, there's American Electric, there's GE even. So we're not stuck on this one type here. There may be some that are better than what we're looking at. And if we're just to go back to the ones hanging down for a second, if we go to ones that are hanging down from the deck, those are usually going to be level with the bottom of the girder, so you don't really see the light anyway. The fixture itself, you're just going to see the light coming out from under the girder.
I think the question and direction we need from the committee as far as at this time would be the more fixtures, less intense light versus less fixtures. More light. Now from there, I think Greg can finish the lighting design and then send that back through.
I have a question, and I'm gonna leave in just a minute, so maybe I'm messing up the agenda, but when I go to this list and we had the colored lighting system idea.
Yeah.
That's still kind of pending in future. And so I wonder if we can come back to that idea, because if we want to do that, this might be a moot point because we might want to do the lighting system anyway.
Sure, and I think what we're talking about is, again, setting that baseline of DOT paid for light that is there that would in the future be replaced.
Yeah, I guess I'm saying, like, can we come back to the conversation about DOT considering paying for a colored lighting system?
So that's what David's here to talk about, is
Yeah.
like what our city process is for the art and all these extra things. And like, we have some time to work through
So that would just clearly be out of bounds of what we could negotiate to ask DOT to do.
Well, with what, I don't know the answer to that, but what could happen here is that if we needed them to like say, like we install all these lights and then we just want to turn off the ones that conflict with the colored ones later, this leaves open the option to do that. Like if we don't want the middle ones anymore, because now we've got some colored light display.
Yeah.
This is leaving the option open to, at least they're there if we need them. And when we get ready to install the colored ones or whatever it might be, those can get turned off if it's just too much or.
I get that. I guess what I'm asking is like, if what we really want is the colored lights, I don't know that we've had a full conversation with DOT about saying, thank you for offering these, but we'd like something different. Can we talk about what that would look like?
If you're pointing to like the cost that I'm saying that we would contribute to this to go to something else, there's probably a window that discussion can be had, but it wouldn't be the utility bill and all that stuff. It would be similar to the Formliner conversation where there'd be a delta. To move forward with the design and where we're at, we kind of need to set that baseline, and then if there's a color light discussion that happens over the next little period and y'all say, all right, we decided what we wanted. And it very well be that y'all make that decision before these lights get installed and we've not expended that money. Can we contribute the $74,000 to your color light system? Potentially. I think not going to be necessarily my decision, but I feel like we have a precedence that that's possible.
I think what I'm hearing implied is that like you all just investing in a more aesthetic destination-based lighting scheme is out of the bounds of what you consider paying for, period.
Correct.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that was my 2 minutes of hard talk. I gotta go. But, all right, I feel like I've got conclusion that I tried.
Yeah, and I think there's a level of, like we said, there's a baseline what DOT can pay
I get
for.
that.
That if that's not what you want, then the conversation becomes delta between the two.
Yep.
That's where we always kind of fall to.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Susan, did you have a question?
I do. It's along the same line as that last question, but I got a little bit confused about, looking at the lighting plan that Micah had proposed and looking at potential installation on the girders and just looking at the 27 foot height and the potential lighting plan, it would make more sense to me that
It's
the,
17 feet high.
okay, 17, okay. So that would be the height, that would be the elevation of the bottom of the girders is 17 now?
At Patton, that's just based off the clearance. Now, the ground in the space between.
Yeah, yeah,
Could potentially change, and that grade of the structure changes. The 17.5 feet comes from roadway clearance.
okay. All right. So the conversation about having any lighting at all installed attached to the girder system is still up in the air as far as being discussed? Or is someone working on that?
What we're saying is from a base, what we're proposing is
Mhm.
that from a baseline perspective, the DOT would install and pay for one middle run in the middle of that span A
Right.
on the girder.
Okay. Okay. And then on, okay. So if it's 17, then I think my question is pretty much mute because I think at 17 height, the distribution for the ceiling installed lighting might not be much more effective than it will be if it's the contemporary type that's on the screen now. So my question is pretty much mute if it's that low of a girder.
Okay, thanks. Let's see, I just want to say, Matt, even though Maggie has left, that from my point of view, any colored lighting scheme has to be supplementary to providing adequate lighting underneath the bridge for pedestrians and bicyclists to feel safe. And I don't think that colored lighting by itself is going to do that, but okay. So
He was saying that one of the things we need to decide whether we want more fixtures that are less bright or fewer fixtures that are brighter.
yeah,
And to me, having more fixtures that are less bright provides a more even feeling, less glare, and just less stark of a feeling under the bridge. So to me, putting in more fixtures that aren't as bright would be the way to go. Anybody else?
I agree with that.
So
And I think having that and just a preference, which we've kind of settled on one of the two on the left. And think you kind of like the contemporary, if you can work maybe for the wall side, that's enough for Greg to
I think
more
that we
fine
can
tune
work.
his concept.
What we will do is take that direction and work towards a lighting design that meets the minimum foot candles across that corridor with a contemporary style fixture that has a less output, more downcast, including the run of downlighting in the middle.
That sounds good.
Okay.
That sounds great. Yeah.
Could you just repeat that though?
And we'll put this and we've got a document that we're working on to
Okay.
summarize all this, but what we'll show is that DOT will pursue a lighting design under those principles of, from a contemporary style lighting output, 4 runs, one on the vertical abutment, one in the middle of span A, one on the first bent pointing back towards the MEP, and one on the far opposite side pointing to the sidewalk of Patton. And we will increase the number of fixtures based off that desired light output to get the required foot candles.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now, okay, I think we closed that. So, city process on public art.
Sure. I'm going to talk in real high level terms of how generally we operate, and then we can field questions and talk about how a project may get developed to work for something like that. So the city has a public art program and is housed in the planning department in my division, which is the community planning and urban design division. We have one staff member that half of their time is dedicated to that program. We also have a Public Arts and Cultural Commission that is currently on pause right now. So they generally look at things from our perspective. That's made up of members of the public volunteers. Generally, how a project starts is project identification. Normally, a project comes to our arts program or from PAC through a project like this. It says, we got this space, we want a mural on this wall, or we're recently working on the urban trail. We're replacing one of those markers right now, but that came through the urban trail committee. So normally someone or a project or a process will identify a place for a public art or an element for public art. Depending on what that is, we develop a project or a process, which is basically how big it is. It's real small. We may do something in-house. There's someone we have to hire, put a call out for artists and have artists submit a bunch of concepts. The way we ran the one we're working on right now with the S&W marker for the urban trail was, we knew it needed to be replaced. We had a rough idea as to what the committee wanted to represent. We put an RFP, a call out for artists. We've got a call in for artists. That PAC team, I think it was a subcommittee of the PAC team, then chose, I think it was 3 of those artists and gave those artists a stipend to develop concepts for that area. Then a concept was chosen and moved forward. But within that project development, clearly, one, you have to identify the space. What are you looking to do? Is it wide open, or are you going in very specific? It's this wall, it's this. Are you saying, here's your space, and come up with artistic ideas or something in between? Again, depending on how brand it is or whatnot, it will drive the process different. Budget obviously is there funding available? What is that funding going to pay for? And that part of that, a lot of times what we do is what we call project charters. So we will lay out what that project is, who are the team members, what is the public engagement process, what is the budget, where is the budget coming from the city's perspective, what resources as far as people power and do we need to do to run this process? And then we move forward with it. So it is, every project's a little different, but normally the projects come to us through a process like this or out of Arts Master Plan, and then a project or a process is built around that specific project. So something like this, we would have to take back to the city and with feedback from DOT in this group, and what are we looking at here? Is it this whole space? Is it this whole wall? Are we asking them to come up with lighting concepts? Are we pitching it to them completely wide open and saying, we want a path alignment, lighting, public art, dream up everything you want, or do you put rails on it, right? And normally someplace in the middle as to what you do with that. Again, real general terms as to how this has not been developed as a project yet. Clearly it can be. It's something we'd have to go back and talk to our department and the larger city as the, again, resources funding. Time frames, it sounds like there is time with this because it sounds like it's not something that's going to necessarily influence the bridge design moving forward, and this will be something that the art will respond to of the bridge design. So I'll stop there and field any questions, but it's real high level, real general, because this has not been put in any process yet internally from the city's perspective as to this is the space, this is what the charge is, this is what the budget is. That is something we would have to develop based off of what we're hearing here, what the final bridge design is, and what are the criteria that you're trying to accomplish, right? Some of the things we talked about before, is it congregation space? Is it a drive-through space? Is it decorative lighting, or is it decorative lighting trying to light the space, right? Those are all design elements and decisions at the end of the day. And even that, if it's larger than that, it may be a different team than just artists. It may be a landscape architect that's involved, or maybe our in-house landscape architects that get involved. Again, it just depends what that scope is and what the charge is.
Well, we certainly do have time, or you have time. Would you entertain a temporary installation, a rotating kind of thing to keep things changing, 9 months, a year, or 2-year installation? Or do you feel like maybe that would be maybe subject to vandalism because it's a little bit out of sight.
I think that's part of the process to look at that, but I think if the, whoever's, you know, creating this charge, if that's something to explore, I think it definitely can be explored. We did temporary art in Pack Square this year, not rotating, it was a temporary exhibits, but we did something like that not this year, a couple years back. So it's possible. We also partner with, you know, our nonprofit partners. We work with Arts ABL quite often and other organizations. So maybe something that says, you know what, we'll work with this, but we're gonna let Arts ABL run this process and let them handle it. Who knows? Again, there's options. There are definitely options out there.
Dave, let me ask you this, given what you know about this project and what the city maybe conceptually is thinking about the area between this bridge and where you come into the downtown area, what we've done with the Bowen Bridge, what opportunities do you see in this area generally with this? I mean, how could this bridge contribute, or what we do with it in terms of art, contribute to conceptually what the city might want to accomplish as the gateway into the city for local traffic?
And I think that's open to interpretation and like how big we define this space in terms of what we're trying to do as part of this art focused group, you know, if we define it in a way, I mean, what we've been talking about here is just this Patton Avenue Bridge and the wing walls and the abutment and what's going on in the columns and I don't know, do we have a statue underneath? I don't know. That larger conversation, I think, is like a broader discussion that, you know, what do we want to do? Are we talking about programming the space on the north side of Patton as well? That's something that's come up here too. And so I think that's part of what we need to figure out is, are we doing a call for projects or whatever for just the bridge? And then we have like something else, some other process for like programming that space on the north. Do we have another call for projects for like what's happening more on the Bowen Bridge side? I think that's something that we need to look at holistically, but also not bite off more than we can chew in terms of who's in charge of what piece.
Has there been an approach with a comp plan for kind of grabbing all these spaces? Just generally,
Meaning that I'm not sure I'm following, Mike, but I think maybe I am. So as far as like these leftover spaces and the
Right.
bridges and
Yeah.
stuff, my understanding, and jump in here, Nathan, we really don't really understand truly what they all are.
Yeah.
Right. So we can't design things that we don't know what they are yet. And my understanding is, well, truly I couldn't know what they are until we get a little further where the bridge is and the underpasses and
yeah,
I think there's going to have to be some process or and probably city to identify what are those spaces are, look at them, what are the benefits, cost benefits, what are the opportunities, and what are the areas that we're concerned with coming encampments and things, right? You're going to look at all of those things as I think this project moves forward and those spaces start taking shape.
And also part of it too is that some of these spaces around this interchange and beyond will stay within DOT's purview, whereas some of it will become city purview possibly. So those are two different conversations. And there's also like safety aspects just in terms of highway operations for what needs to remain clear, what plants can go where, whatever we're doing. Like there's a lot of considerations there that I don't think any of that's in a comp plan. So.
No.
From just a baseline standpoint, schedule wise, we're pushing towards right-of-way plans in September. Obviously, we've got other efforts and there's design reviews and things are changing and being talked about, but that's kind of the time frame that we would start to know with some level of certainty. All right, this is where the outside major lines are.
Right.
To Ashley's point, there's areas that are going to remain DOT right-of-way that would be land use type agreements with the city who then can enter in with a third party or whatever that would be. That would be the area immediately around the interchange and under the bridge, including the larger area down to Smith Mill Creek. All that's kind of there and potential. Then you kind of move away from the interchange, you get into right-of-way disposal where it's currently interstate that will no longer be interstate, and then we will vacate it. And then you get into the disposal process and where that property ultimately becomes somebody else's and you can do whatever. But I think us having like a firm, like set, knowing where those places are probably early fall.
Okay. That's why I asked that question, is just as we're kind of talking about programming these spaces and really trying to think through that, what can you pin down now as far as the aesthetics committee? What will you pin down in the fall? What will you pin down 5 years from now, whenever the
Yeah.
acquisition process gets
I
in?
think
How to
the-
set the bounds on that right now is the tough one.
The course going forward, as I understand it, is that we are going to be turning over a lot of stuff to the city, from like the city, the committee has developed a set of landscape organizing principles, which I think we will probably augment before we disband here. But then the city is going to take those organizing principles and with NCDOT develop the landscaping plan. And that doesn't happen till 12 to 18 months prior to the project being finished. I think we envision that with, general guidance from the committee, it's going to be the city that develops the public art program. It's going to be the city that develops any reuse of the area north of the bridge. And it's certainly the city that's going to develop the plans for development / redevelopment of land that becomes available from NCDOT. So, so we're not, we are not going to be in existence and be sort of micromanaging any of those processes.
Cool, thank you.
Question for NCDOT. For the mural, I assume that you originally had planned the abutment under the bridge to be stamped and stained concrete, and there was a cost for that. Since that's not being done, can that cost be credited back to the city to pay for the artwork that will be replacing it?
Potentially, I don't know that I could answer it fully. I think the strategic element has been that these buckets of money that we're talking about are coming from standard DOT policy for projects in this area, which means money that we would spend on the form liners on the barrier rail, even though you're not picking our standard, you go above, still contributes. We could have a look at that and see if we could apply the same theory to potentially helping with the public art funding piece of that. I don't know the details of how that would work. I guess all I'm saying is I'll dig into it.
Okay, thanks. And also, not to distract you from doing that, but I'm wondering whether the landscape budget can be used, how far the landscape budget can go to be used to support public art installations.
It definitely can be a part of that. Chris is looking at me, he can chime in, but I think they definitely go hand in hand, especially if you're talking about a public art piece, the landscaping around that. I don't know about the specifically paying like for the art itself. I don't know, you have any frame of reference?
Well, that's something that once it gets to the point where they start working on that, because they start working on those plans during the construction process. So our landscape architect from Raleigh would be getting with the city and, all right, here's kind of the amount we have. What's your thoughts? What's your plans? And then basically start from there on where that goes. And that can go towards hardscape or it can go towards plantings. Thing about the hardscape portion, you can use that to help maybe set up an area for the art itself, but the money goes very, very quickly when you start doing hardscapes. We just finished a project down in Burnsville where they had the US 19 widening project, which is a very large widening project that went through 2 different counties. And once they started trying to put hardscapes in there to help enhance some of their public art they had, the money went quickly. So they stepped it back and just did more plantings to help do the enhancements to try and do the hardscape process.
Kyle, do you want to answer some of that? Did you hear the question?
Yeah, I heard it. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Uh,
Or maybe introduce yourself to them and who you are and what you do.
okay. So I'm Kyle Cooper. I work with the aesthetics engineering section with Roadside Environmental with Department of Transportation. So I'm a landscape architect with Roadside, and Jeff Lackey used to be on these meetings, so he would usually be the one answering the questions, but he retired recently. So typically with the funding that we're allowed with our planting guidelines, art is not usually paid for with that money. Like we're talking about earlier, hardscapes, plantings, different type of low walls, that kind of thing can be paid for. But typically our aesthetic guidance policy does not allow for artwork to be paid for. Now, some of that's at the discretion of the division engineer, but it's not something we normally do.
From the larger point, I think to whatever charge is given, and I don't the city aspect of all that. I think from the department standpoint, the money that you have for landscaping, which is substantial, I mean, it's the 1.5. It's basically like $11 million, which again can go fast if you start doing certain things, but can go hand in hand with whatever effort comes about. And our roadside and Kyle, the new Jeff, can help. Will help be a part of that and help facilitate. So all that kind of works together.
Question. This kind of all works in together. I was reviewing the aesthetics guidelines that were finally produced, and this is a question. We specifically had wanted that there be no chain link fences, only the quote goat fences, which are the 4-inch webbed wire metal with the wooden post. And the state had agreed to that, but I did not see that. Is that still in the specifications someplace?
It is. I can review that document, but yeah, as far as our right-of-way fencing, it's just a woven wire.
Just their standard
Yes,
fencing we
standard for us.
install.
You're saying you didn't see it specifically called out in the guidelines document?
Yes.
And it may be, Mike, that it shows up in the RFP.
Okay.
But I'll confirm that and I can email it to the group, or Mark will, either one.
And then I don't know if you have different heights of the fencing, a 6 foot versus a 4 foot, but I know that in our discussions previously that along Riverside specifically, they wanted the 4 foot fence as opposed to 6 foot fence. Are they just 4 foot everywhere, or is this different than general?
As far as the right-of-way fencing, it's our standard for woven wire, which I believe is 4. You got me on the spot, Mike. I don't have it the drawing in front of me.
4 foot wire, and then
There's an additional post height for barbed wire, but we wouldn't. That's a wildlife thing.
Okay.
So it's all should be the 4. Specifically, you said on Riverside, you're talking about.
There's a fencing between the MUP and the railroad.
Okay. Yeah.
And I know that farther along in the Arts District, there's a railroad and there's a street, and for some reason there's a 6 foot high chain link fence. I think that's barbed wire on it that you literally walk around.
In some of those places, that fence is not ours.
Okay. I just want to make sure that didn't happen again.
So our fence is related to our control of access line, which is the line basically around the interstate.
Right.
When you start talking about the railroad, there are places they have their own fencing, which is what you're describing, I believe, is remaining railroad fence.
Okay. And one last question on this. I was confused on, in the documents, it said the cities were to provide the planters for Bowen Bridge.
Correct.
So the city's paying for and constructing those planters and handing them over to the NCDOT?
I can answer that.
Okay.
That's a landscape cost.
Yeah,
That comes out of the landscape funding.
the document is geared towards the construction contract.
Thank you. So the landscape contractor is the one who'll be providing those.
Great, that would be a part of that 1.5% we talked about.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
That's in part of the funding that the council's already approved.
Yeah, the better, yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's in there. It's just, it's not specific. The clarification he's pointing to is that the Archer Right is not doing that. It'll be.
Gotcha.
Okay, so let's move on to the MUP cycle track. And I know that that is Mike Sewell here? Yeah. Mike, you sent some aspirational qualifications for bike paths, etc. I don't know if you want to discuss that. But I think what we are talking about is an extension of what we have agreed to on the Bowen Bridge. And, the further enhancements to the city's bikeway system goes through Lucy.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'll include you. I just pulled some, the National Association of City Transportation Officials has bikeway standards. And so I shared those standards with Ted, and sort of in response to seeing that what was, I believe at the last meeting was proposed, this was a 4-foot two-way cycle track. And so I just want to be caught, based on the NACDO, that's not advisable. And so I also want to put it in the context of, when we say we use the language bikeway, and encouraging us to think about the light mobility way or the e-way, because we have all these new devices that are on the market, and they're only going to keep going and proliferating. So we really want to be thinking about the speed differentials and having adequate space for people to move safely across the bridge. And then the last piece that I wanted to reference too was that, we're not just building a connection from West Asheville into downtown. These multi-use paths are going to be integrated into the Hellbender Regional Trail System. It's going to be the backbone. What we're building is the backbone of that future network. And so when we're thinking about and designing these multi-use paths, it should be informed by light mobility, increased use in the mobility, and the Hellbender Regional Network.
Okay, all of that is duly noted. What I would probably encourage is to start that conversation with the city, and because these are definitely upgrades from anything that's been proposed with respect to this project. And if the city at some point wants to pay for those, add and pay for those upgrades, that's something that the city will need to decide on and fund. Am I speaking correctly on that, Lucy?
I think so.
Okay. Okay. So, given the cost document that, that Mark provided. I think, you know, we are safely within room, I think, of being able to include the, MUP cycle crack extension, as, part of what's recommended for this project, going from the Bowen Bridge to just west of the new Patton Avenue Bridge. Do we want to finalize that? Do I have a motion to do that?
I'll move that, we include that in our recommendations, yes.
Okay.
That's the $277,000 item.
Right, yeah. Mhm.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on that? Okay, I'm gonna call, Mike,
Yes.
Lynn,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
and myself is a yes. Okay, so that is taken care of. Okay. Okay, we get to move on to new business. Okay, so, I think we want to think about what, if any, landscaping, organizing principles we might want to introduce with respect to the, West Patton Avenue Bridge. I think that, you know, but needs to take into consideration the, potential surplus land that's out there, and the view shed that people will have coming into the city along Patton Avenue. I'll just throw that open to start talking about what guidance we might want to. Before I do that, I'll say one. I'll kick it off with one thing. I know that with respect to the get my directions, the southeast ramp area. That's the ramp area that's, I think it's the largest one, and it's the one that's closest to the Westwood neighborhoods. That there has been concern expressed there that that area be sort of maximized to the point possible to soften any noise impact coming from the interstate. And that would probably argue a forestation of that area. Which potentially is in conflict with a reuse for urban development. But then again, there might be the question of, like, is it really feasible to have that an urban scale development within the loop of an interstate ramp?
Generally it's not allowable anyway. There are exceptions because of existing conditions and things, but the footprint inside the interchange would remain DOT right away.
Especially as reduced as this interchange is in size and acreage compared to, like, something larger. You not see that. There's really not a safe way to have any kind of urban development where you're accessing it from the roadway. Now, there might be potential work with the city in some areas for like a pop-up, walkable, bikeable market or something like that, but not as far as a actual place for be able to access with the vehicles to get to shopping or something else.
Okay. So now I'll throw it open for discussion. Thoughts?
Well, it's kind of early to be specific at
Yeah.
all, so we're talking very, very general.
Right.
And I feel like we probably have addressed this generally in our organizing principles that we already put together, but specific to this area, certainly to maximize landscaping where feasible, to mitigate visual and noise impacts as much as possible. And then following the rest of the principles we already set out as to using native plants and a lot of trees and everything else that we wrote very eloquently, I think, already. But I just don't have it in front of me.
Right, right, yeah, yeah.
And a lot of that would be what the city works with Kyle and his group on about doing the plan for this entire project, getting some of those areas addressed the way that what you've requested.
As we understood it from Jeff before he resigned or he retired, that it could go out to bid or it could be done in-house. Is that correct, still the case, or is it
Most
more
likely it
likely
will
to
be-
be in-house?
Most likely be out to bid.
Out to bid, okay. So
Talking
you'd be
about the design or the installation?
the design, not the
I'll leave that
installation.
up to Kyle. I'm not sure what their workload and again, this is gonna be a few years down the road, so I don't know what their workload will look like at that point either. But I'll leave as far as the design up to Kyle if he thinks that might be more in-house or consultant.
Yeah, right now we're still planning on doing in-house so we can control it a little more, but like you said, it's going to depend on what our workload is at that point since it's so far out.
One thing that I think is we can already see, at least I can see anyway, is that in taking that road over Patton rather than under it, the grades are going to change around that interchange. So that as you come from the southwest corner where Patton Avenue is across where Regent Park Drive Boulevard is, that area across the road going up towards the bridge is now going to be going up, which creates a little bit of an opportunity, vista opportunity. And on the opposite side, it's going to be kind of going either level or maybe down. So there are going to be some spaces in there where you can, with some creative landscaping, you can create some really nice vistas going into that area from Regent that really will start at Regent Park Boulevard as you go underneath the bridge and then go on into the city. But without knowing really what the city wants to accomplish in that sort of the vista in that corridor, it's kind of hard to know exactly what would work. But clearly there are going to be a couple of opportunities around that interchange, I think, to do some really creative landscaping that would create a nice vista from the road as you go through there.
I agree.
Yeah.
But again, it may be some time before
Yeah, we just
really
don't know. Yeah,
can envision
right,
it.
exactly, right, yeah.
A lot of it is, will be decided as the project progresses, the construction and all.
I could make one recommendation. Reforestation is great, but as far as the sound mitigating factor, vegetation is super, super low on the
Sure.
sound mitigation
Sure.
factor. If there's going to be a massive amount of cut and fill throughout this entire project, if there is surplus soil, I think one of the areas that really would benefit the Westwood neighborhood and the Hazel Mill area is if you could actually build this up as much as possible in this area and raise the grade and then try to, still go in with vegetation. And to that point, I would, really recommend pollinator gardens and things like that that aren't mowed. But if you could raise the grade here, that would really help try to protect at least a little bit of the Westwood and Hazel Mill area with the sound coming off of the overpass that's now suddenly way up in the air that's going to be shooting over the grade. So I think maybe that would be a recommendation is to maximize earthwork as much as possible from a viewpoint and from a sound mitigating factor.
The other thing that if you look at this, we've always operated from the presumption that the real entrance point was going to be Bowman Bridge. Once you decided to take the road over Patton Avenue, now it creates an opportunity to really start the experience at Regent Park Boulevard at that intersection before as you go into the city. So the landscaping would fit nicely into that, beginning to create that experience as you go into underneath the bridge and into the city.
I think Mike mentioned the point last week that you guys have monuments scheduled to go in, you know, different areas through here. Does it make sense to pull one of those monuments west of the Patton Bridge towards Regent Park?
It may, yeah.
I think maybe one more thing is if you are putting planters along Bowen Bridge, it might make sense to echo those in the spaces somewhere through here, just to start getting that visual language started here as you move towards the Bowen Bridge. Again, if the planters are being supplied by the city and, you know, hardscapes do get expensive, you don't want to do overkill, but it might make sense to at least do them 4 corners, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Again, just to start that visual language as you move eastward or westward, depending which way you're going.
Okay, anything else? I think from the standpoint of the general overview, which are the organizing principles, I think the takeaways from this are the maximizing landscape, including earthwork, to reduce noise impact on the neighborhoods, and paying attention to maximizing to as much as possible view shed opportunities, and integrating the design language of the Bowen Bridge with what's happening between the new bridge and the Bowen Bridge. So I will draft those into the current organizing principles, and okay. And one other thing that I'll just say, just toss out there, is that for all the potential detriments of having the bridge go over Patton Avenue, it does create a sort of a natural barrier transition between whatever is going to occur in the future. And personally, I think it's probably a few decades away between the Bowen Bridge and the new bridge, and what lies on the other side of the bridge along Patton Avenue, which, you know, my professional experience tells me is not going to be subject to any kind of redevelopment. You know, strict commercial development is incredibly difficult to reverse, and you need, you know, tremendous development pressure in order to begin thinking of doing it. So this sort of, rather than have the, you know, like one right up against the other, it sort of has, if there are any advantages to it, it creates that natural buffer between the two uses. Okay, memorialization of the committee's recommendations. I know that Nathan's been working on a document that is you know, putting together the recommendations that we've made. I am sort of thinking that the committee might want to have a resolution that summarizes its recommendations that then can go before the city. Would this be something that would be brought to city council, or do you see city council not being involved at this point?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, they wouldn't need to make a decision on it.
Yeah.
So it could just be an informational or a presentation or something. Or even maybe in part of the agenda briefing before. a Tuesday council meeting.
Uh-huh.
I don't know, we have to talk about that more
Yeah.
internally, but I don't think it needs to be, I mean, there's no decision for them
Yeah,
to vote on, so it would,
no increased
Good.
funding. Yeah,
right. So it could, but we have to talk about what that looks like.
okay, okay.
From a document standpoint, just for DOT's perspective,
Mhm.
and I don't know if Mark, if you want to share, did you send that draft that
Yeah.
that you see? I
Yeah.
think the way we're interpreting it or thinking that this will work is once the committee, we finalize that, and I'm assuming, I'm kind of thinking y'all would have some time to look it over and work and all that stuff. Ultimately, it will live as an addendum to the already approved guidelines
Mhm.
that go with that municipal agreement. So it's just that extra page. So the formatting and ultimately would all be very similar to that, and that we're just memorializing the decisions that have been made. So,
Yeah, and I
That's
certainly
kinda
think
our
they need an
intention.
opportunity to review, because my guess is you probably have recommendations that you talked about in here, but didn't really necessarily apply to the design or DOT funding part, like some of the landscape and stuff you're just talking about, that you'll probably want to add to what's on the list now. I mean, y'all's recommendations, I certainly think y'all should review it before it goes in.
I think there's probably an update that we need to make to what Mark sent you just from the conversations today. So we'll crank that out. and Get it to you.
So I would, I would think that we might need like just one more meeting just to sort of vote on, discuss and vote on a resolution that memorializes our decisions and, possibly how we go forward, if we go forward with anything, with, a presentation to city council or whatever. And
Do we want to wait maybe 2 weeks? So we have time to get all the,
Yeah, I would recommend let's get through the rounds of back and forth on a document before we meet again. And get, because that we can do just going back and forth, from a language perspective, and then we can discuss with the city, can trigger whatever additional meeting is needed for a final resolution of approval.
Yeah. Yeah.
so we can see how long that's taking and kind of plan accordingly.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
And, and the, how should we approach the custom design formula? Is that something that you can coordinate with Fitzgerald on in terms of sending it and getting a price, or should we do that with you supplying a contact?
Could be either way. I would suggest, typically from what I've heard from this committee, there'll be questions that I will not be able to ask. And you can reach out to them and ask. I think it would be easier for you to get all the information you need if you contact.
Okay.
I would just be contacting them and asking for pricing.
Yeah, yeah.
I think if that's something, and I hear that you're really interested in it, there may be other questions that you will have that would take some back and forth. So I think it'll be more efficient for you all
Okay,
to do that.
okay. So if you could send me your contact there?
I have no.
Oh.
Yeah. It was pulled up on the World Wide Web.
Okay.
In this meeting.
Okay, so
Right.
just
Yeah.
initiate.
It's not one of the
Yeah.
it's not one of the form liner manufacturers that our normal vendors
Yeah.
provided to us, right? So.
I think Nathan, you suggested earlier that we send it out to several.
That would be my suggestion, and
Get
we can
prices.
help y'all facilitate as far as contacts.
Okay.
But what I think the best course of action is to take the design you want, put it out there, and not necessarily go down the road we want custom, but just to ask this is what we want, because there very well could be some very close, similar things that exist. Because that
That's what we
design is-
pulled up, right?
Sure.
Didn't you?
Right.
Pretty
You
close.
voted on that being the
The alternate,
preferred,
yeah.
right?
Backup.
And that's, I don't know that you're gonna get much closer than that unless you wanted a total different design. I mean, it's
Yeah.
6 inches off of the total height of the wall. So it's as close as you're gonna get unless you want a totally different design, right? Maybe different spacing of the reveals or other items.
So I didn't be sure I understand. We're talking about us, the committee.
Yeah,
sending us-
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
But Nathan
We'll
said
help,
they would.
we'll help you.
Yeah, okay. I was gonna say, yeah.
Do we have any guesstimate on when we will be ready to do the next meeting?
I would think at least a couple weeks. The other thing that's in my mind is we have some multiple efforts. I've got to reach out to the coalition group. I'm hoping to do that middle of July, and that's gonna be some effort too. I would maybe say with the holiday and with that other effort, maybe a good target is more towards the end of July. And then in the meantime, we can go through several rounds of comments and back and forth on memorializing what's been discussed over the past 5-6 meetings with us. If
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Okay. I am leaving town for, close to a month on the 23rd.
Okay.
So, if we could schedule it before then, that would be great. If not, hopefully Lynn will be in town, maybe.
I don't know. We'll
July
see.
23rd. That's July 23rd.
Yeah. No, actually, July 22nd is when we're flying out.
Do we do it, how close can we do it to that date and not be a problem for you? Can we have a meeting pretty close to that?
I
date?
think pretty close to that date.
Okay, so maybe that previous week.
Yeah,
That might be too soon, Lynn.
That's,
or,
yeah.
yeah,
that's the
even
third
like
week.
even the 20th or the 21st,
We can try the 21st is on Monday.
Yeah.
I mean, we could tentatively kind of shoot for that. I think if we are successful in the language piece of it, then I feel like we can go from there.
Can I ask a question and clarify something on Dave's point? So the form liner, the spec form liner that was pulled up on the internet, that's the backup, but you still intend to pursue the Chevron style custom that you have already.
I think what's decided, and I think what we'll work on memorializing in the document, and we'll reference that as the backup, is basically a chevron pattern with a required reveal, the 1.5 inch or whatever it is, so that, and then from there we can take the time that we do have and just basically send that, not necessarily asking for custom, but help kind of disperse, just to gather in all the options associated with basically just trying to match that top of the pillar look. I've got a thought about it. We'll talk about it, maybe how that's best done, but.
Okay. Anything else?
I wanted to talk about, dangerous, new topic at 7 to 5. But it is something that we've got in the draft and we talked about last week, and something that we internally at DOT and other costs that we're okay. So I think it's something we would want to memorialize in the document. The whole metal scrim type thing. We did look at some estimates of that. Mark can point to in a minute. I don't know if we have them on here, do we, Mark?
I didn't put it on there because I was waiting for
It's
feedback.
very unknown. The only example we have of that was from 2016. The city of Raleigh contributed some costs, and we tried to look at inflation, but we're probably looking at the $1 million-ish range for the whole system.
It's not gonna happen.
Do you have that detail of how it attaches?
Yeah.
Can you show that? Here's what we kind of talked about internally and what we're going to propose that we go ahead and memorialize in the document at our cost.
It'll take me a second.
So 4 I-beams that we have on this bridge are precast members. The way that one in Raleigh is designed, it's a metal plate that's bolted to the beam and then backlit. And the sleeves and where it bolts to the bridge are just cast into the beam. And we have a detail for that that'll show in a minute. What we're proposing, based off the discussion, and again, this would just be to the future art installation, we'll go ahead and cast the holes in the beams. And we'll pick the spots spacing wise where you can, at some point through the art installation standpoint, give those dimensions to whatever group so that you know you can bolt something to the beam. It just has to connect here. That's kind of the direction that we're going, and we would memorialize that in the document that we're preparing.
And this is on both sides of the girders, on the east and west side?
Yeah. Both sides, but exterior girders.
Right. I'm just, I can see it.
Yeah.
Right.
How would that appear? I mean, would we see it?
It would be small enough. You wouldn't notice it until you put something up.
I don't have it
Just
saved
go back
separately, so
forward.
it's in an email. I apologize. But, I mean, like that's the bottom. It's sleeves that are cast in the girder and bolts go through it. And I looked at the plans because this was the full design in that project. I made some modifications to it, but there's basically a frame, bolts to those, and then the actual panel attaches to that frame. That's the mechanism. And then that at the bottom shows the luminaire. That's a big cost of it on it. I mean, it's pretty good.
That's why it gets expensive.
That's why it gets expensive quick. I mean,
And I don't know that you are going to get to any quick decision about what that looks like and whether you do it. The point would be, I think what we're saying and what we document now through this process is the sleeves that would allow you to do something of this type.
We definitely allow for flexibility.
Sure, yeah. Whether you backlight it or not.
I think it's a great idea for the future. Yeah.
So we're just,
what we do may have some limits on what you do, but I think with the design we have, we can get close enough that you're probably not really hindered with the amount of weight you're talking about hanging from it. I think because they're spaced at 7'6" down there. They were using 15-foot panels, 7'6" for the holes because the frame is actually 7'6" and there's 2 frames per panel. I think we can get close enough that if it's something you ever want to use,
you could design to it.
You could design.
That's a really cool idea.
Yeah. So I know we didn't talk about it, but I want to bring that up because it's actually, I think, already in what Mark sent you. But we'd show that basically the limits of what we're doing there is the sleeves for future DOT's costs.
But the estimated cost for the metal scrim would be $1 million.
It was 800 something thousand.
I came to 800 something thousand. That's for just the span over Patton. And again, I'm working off one project. I did have multiple quotes on the one project, multiple bidders, but I'm working on one project that was 9 years ago. So
what was it in
component is
2016?
inflation. Well, they had a lot larger quantity.
Sure.
But it was $700 something a linear foot for the screen. But like I said, the luminaires are a big part of the cost. You could, just for future thoughts, the screen it's not a 2/3, 1/3 split, but it's something along those
And that
lines.
screen, is that 4 inches? Is that?
I think the 4 inches is the frame.
Oh, the frame.
Yeah,
for it. Okay,
Because
gotcha.
there's a separate, like I said, the frame bolts on. This does not really show the attachment of the screen to the frame necessarily, but this is, this is a frame, and then they were showing 1/2 inch metal on the fascia. And
Wonder why they don't put the luminaires behind and the frame part.
I don't know why they're mounted on their own frame. I will say I got some night pictures of what's down there. That does look really cool.
I bet it does. Maybe it's just more of a glow situation.
So they put it underneath them separate to be able to actually access it to
Oh,
change
right.
out the.
Yeah, that
Otherwise,
makes
you gotta
sense.
take the whole
You get a
thing out.
very
I'd say
great
train them.
spot.
That's exactly right. We had to have it below for maintenance.
Yeah,
That
you can get
makes
to them
sense.
without taking the whole thing out.
Right.
And Nathan, back to the point about the conduit that you're going to
Well,
put in,
That's
that
great
would
to have
That would
this
feasibly, you
feed
could do
those,
that.
yeah.
available for the future.
You want to put that on a different line, obviously, than the rest of your lighting, but
Yeah.
Thank
still
you
be
for
possible.
doing
thank
that.
you.
That's
Thank you.
awesome.
Yeah. And that reminds me that there was one other question that I had. on that document, I know there was a part that said that the non-traffic side of the bridge rail, I think, was not being programmed for stack stone colored treatment. I assume, does that refer to what's seen from the interstate?
I think what you're referencing is when we were considering form liners and what all services it could go on, you've got that single face barrier that's here on the
We
bridge.
discussed that at one time,
At one point, we
Okay.
discussed form liner on the back side of that.
the pedestrian side.
Okay,
I took that out because you basically
Okay.
said everything's smooth except the bridge rail.
got it.
That wasn't it, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Anything else? It is 5:00. And we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.